I'd really like to know if Jesus actually rose from the dead as a historical fact. I'd love to know if there was a real Exodus. That's really interesting and important to me. Now, as somebody who doesn't believe that those things did happen, I still have access to the meaning of the story of something like a resurrection.
Well, let's assume, just for the sake
But I'm not a Christian. It's not enough for me to say, well, do I believe that, self-sacrifice is at the basis of a meaningful life? Oh, maybe, but that's not enough to make me a Christian because I don't believe it's the case. I'm quite interested actually how, you're obviously quite attracted to Christianity and the Christian story. You've got Jesus on your jacket, but I'm interested how that dovetails with your insistence on personal responsibility as the way to live a proper and meaningful life, given that the story of Jesus is one of vicarious redemption. I sort of throw my sins on him, he takes responsibility for the sins that I've committed.
Yeah, well, I
wonder how those go together.
What would you say?
No, Jesus
it's really good.
Clean up
it's
your room
really
for
good
you,
to have a divine ally.
Mm.
And I think the more unerringly you aim upward, the more you walk with God.
Mm-hmm.
And that does mean that Christ is beside you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a reflection of the truth of vicarious redemption. But that doesn't mean you have nothing to do.
Mm.
Right? And Christ makes that very clear in the Gospels. Not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, right? Only those who do the will of my Father.
You must be willing to hate your brother and your father.
There's a tension there because the vicarious redemption idea is a reflection of the mercy of God.
Mm.
It's like if you, and I believe this to be the case, as I said, if your aim is upward, then God is your ally, right? And so he's there with you, bearing the cross, but you're still obliged to carry it, right? And you see that in the story too. That's embedded in the Passion story because there's an insistence in traditional Christianity that the suffering and the death that a man would experience in that situation were real, despite the fact that God was also experiencing it, right? So there's this duality. And I think that's reflected in the idea of vicarious redemption when it's understood properly. It's like, yes, you'll have, here's another way of thinking about it, is that if you aim upward unerringly, you have the spirit of what's good. What are you saying? You've established a relationship with the spirit of what's the highest good. Well, then that's with you. And that's not just a reality. It's like the ultimate reality. It's partly, it's Nietzsche even alluded to that when he said, if you have a why, you can bear any how.
Yeah.
Well, what why? Well, the ultimate why. Well, what does that enable you to do? To bear the ultimate how. And that's exactly what the Passion story is. And so there is a vicarious redemption there because if you do it properly, you don't have to do it alone. But that doesn't mean that there's nothing on you. And you see that too. There's an insistence in the entire biblical library that what humans are called to do is real. Like we're made in the image of God. We're participating in the process by which possibility is transformed in order. We're building, as far as I'm concerned, we're either building the city of God or we're building its alternative, right? With the domain of hell. Actually, really, as well as metaphysics.
I mean, it's interesting you say hell and actually in the same sentence because...
Well, it's easier to believe in hell than heaven.
Well, one of the other criticisms that I made of you in this video was that I felt like you were appropriating religious language illegitimately to apply a sense of the sacred to profane things, to mundane things. And that's perhaps one example. So I can give you a few examples. I mean, one is implied in what you just said there, but you said it, I think, explicitly to Matt Fradd recently on Pints with Aquinas, where you said, if you have studied any amount of history and you don't believe that hell is real,
right,
then you're an idiot.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, I understand, I think, what you mean by that, because hell, hell is a place on earth in many respects, right? Like if you study history and you look at just like what levels of depravity humanity can sink to. Like, and you could quite poetically say, well, if hell isn't the right word to describe that, then I don't know what is.
Right.
Say something like that, right? But clearly, a theological conception of hell does not exist on planet Earth. It's somewhere you go after you die.
It's not so clear. I wouldn't say it's so clear.
Well, certainly not in like the Jewish tradition. And okay,
Dante?
maybe not in the maybe not, but like, I mean, like a modern Christian who asks you, for example, do you believe in hell? And you know that what they mean
the place you go after you die.
Then when you respond and say sort of, well, of course hell is real. Well, you don't believe in hell? Have you studied any amount of history? If you know, it feels like you're sort of describing two different things. There's a equivocation. The other area where this largely happens, I think, is when you said that the very act of doing science.
See, there's a concordance there between that concept of eternal punishment in the afterlife and the hell that unites all totalitarian states. But I don't know what the concordance is. Like I don't understand.
Like, do you think
and I don't speculate generally on anything that's, let's say, beyond death. I mean, what the hell can you say about that? I don't have anything to say about that.
But that's another I don't know point, right? So if I ask you, for example, you know, do you think that Hitler is being punished now? You know, I mean, he's dead, but is he being punished? Or did he ever get punished?
The answer to that question is something like, what is the relationship between the evanescent consciousness of man and eternity? And the answer is, we don't know.
Yeah, when Matt Fradd asked you, do you believe in an afterlife? You said that something like your behaviors or your actions resonate through eternity.
Yeah, well, there's that, which is, in a way, an evasive answer too. But the thing is, we don't understand. We exist in relationship to the infinite, obviously. What that relationship is, no one knows how to conceptualize that in the final analysis. I don't understand the relationship between our binding temporally and eternity. Like, is there something permanent about our conscious experience? I don't know.
I think you excite your Christian listenership when you say, like, not only, you know, do I believe in hell, but you can't not believe in hell. I mean, are you serious? You seriously don't believe in hell? And they think, here's a strong sort of warrior.
Well, and you go, the other
but then they realize that what you mean by hell is just like,
it's so
lots of human suffering and catastrophe, you know, on planet Earth.
But it's more than that, because it is the case that the invitation to hell is offered by the eternal usurper of the moral order. That's true. You end up in hell because you lie. That's also true. And so,
but when you say that's true, you end up in hell because you lie.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
The totalitarian
you're not allowed to use the word
state,
hell, right? Like, what is the thing you're describing? You end up where? In a totalitarian state.
Yes.
And that's fine.
A state of ultimate misery.
But I think this is where somebody might be prone to confusion. And you could say that's their fault, maybe it is. But if somebody's listening to you and do you believe in hell? And you say, of course I believe in hell. How can you not believe in hell? And they go, you know, thank goodness, because that of course is my worldview. I'd love to know how I can defend my vision of hell. And then they realize that when you say hell, what you actually mean is something like totalitarian human regimes.
I guess I mean at least that.
Sure.
Right? And so
fine.
I'm often trying to make a minimal case, right? If I'm trying to elaborate on the meaning of a religious text. What I'm trying to say in all humility is it means at least this. Now, does that cover the entire territory of the meaning? That's very unlikely. You're going to give an exhaustive account? I don't think so. What does that mean in eternity? It's the same question, and then we should draw this part to a close. It's the same question in some sense as the reality of the resurrection of Christ. So the Christian interpretation is Christ defeats death and hell. Okay, well, the logical objection to that is, well, where's the evidence for the defeat? Since death still exists and so does malevolence.
Yeah, sure.
Well, the Christians then will escape, so to speak, into something like a symbolic interpretation and say, well, it's true in eternity. And I think fair enough. I do believe that the idea that Christ defeated death and hell is true. But I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
And so, and does that bother me? Well, I'd rather know, and I'm continuing to investigate it. But I do know, for example,
Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who recently became a Christian, she just had a conversation with Richard Dawkins.
Yeah.
It hasn't gone out yet. I was there. I had the privilege of being. So I've already heard it. I know what they spoke about. But one of the things that Ayaan does is, and I've described it as sort of almost comical, the way that Ayaan talks about her struggle with depression, suicidality, total hopelessness, and then finds that by praying, she's able to sort of elevate her life. And then cuts to Richard Dawkins, sort of, but do you believe that Mary was a virgin when she gave birth? Right? It was funny. It was, I couldn't,
level of analysis problem.
At the same time, I sort of understood it because, and Dawkins says, but surely when you go to church and you're having these feelings, Ayaan, you must recognize that the things he's saying at the pulpit are nonsense. And Ayaan said that she chooses to believe it. She says that I no longer find it to be nonsense because what she implied, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, I can't remember, but it was something like, look, I've been so captured by this meaning that although I don't really understand what it means to say that, Jesus was born of a virgin, I just choose to believe it.
Well,
now that's fine. But what she does, what I was going to say is what she does is says that this to me is like a mystery. I don't really know exactly what it means, but I choose to believe that it's true. And I wonder if that's something like what you're doing here when you say that you believe it's true.
I can just tell you what my experience has been in this sort of thing. So I've spent a lot of time digging into the substructure of mythological accounts, right? In many different cultures.
Yeah.
Now, and my experience continually is the deeper I look, the more that's there. And then I see things come together that make sense that I thought were disparate. And that there doesn't seem to be any limit to that. And so now when I see things that are disparate or even contradictory, I think, well, as you already pointed out, given the nature of the biblical library, there's room for some contradiction. But more than that, I think, well, that might be illogical or irrational, or I might just not understand it. And my experience has been that presumption turns out to be the case far more often than not. And so, you can imagine that you can get the apprehension of a pattern, and you can think the pattern is compelling. And then there are details within the pattern that you don't know how to reconcile. But this is what Ayaan is doing in accordance with your account. It's like, well, I'm not willing to forego my view of the pattern because of some lack of concordance with details, especially given that I'm ignorant.
Yeah.
I can only tell you what has been the pattern of my investigations. It's like the more deeply this is knocking and asking, the more I seek, the more is present.